Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. David Park, and this is my introductory video to explain to you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here, and more importantly, why you are here. Some of you might know who Frank Abagnale is. If you've ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can, that is Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He was one of the most famous con men in all of U.S. history. He forged all sorts of documents to be a doctor, a lawyer. One thing they didn't show in the movie, he forged a degree from Columbia University saying he had graduated in sociology and then went and taught at BYU for a semester. He had never gone to college at all, and he managed to teach an entire sociology course over a semester. Later on, he was asked, "How did you do that?" And he said it was very easy. I just stayed ahead of the students one day in the textbook. So I want to make sure you all know I'm not just some weirdo that put on a suit and made a video and commandeered a class. So let me give you a little bit of background about me. I am half Korean, half Norwegian. That's why my YouTube channel says Corwegian. And I was raised Mormon. I homeschooled until college. And I actually didn't have a GPA when I graduated high school. So I started at NCTC. So did my older sister. And so did my younger brother. We all started there, and we all got 4.0s. My sister graduated, went to college up in New York and played ice hockey and became the captain of a team. I was one of the highest paid transfer students in a college in New York, RIT. And my younger brother, he went on to become a lawyer, got a law degree from SMU. So NCTC is a great place to start your academic career. After I graduated with an undergrad in psychology, I got a master's in history and a PhD in history. I am very passionate about it, and when I am not working, I am also very passionate about bagpipes. Well, I have been for most of my life. I played for about 25 years with the North Texas Caledonian Pipes and Drums. They're an internationally competitive bagpipe band. You can see the link. There's a Facebook page, a YouTube channel, and an Instagram page. You should definitely check the band out. We have played all over the country and at Cowboy Stadium multiple times, American Airlines Center, Bass Hall, and St. Patrick's Day Parade in Lower Greenville multiple times. So if you've seen a bagpipe band in the DFW Metroplex, there's a good chance I either know the band or know someone that's playing. I am currently on a hiatus for medical reasons, but I will definitely get back into it when I can. Besides bagpipes, I absolutely love history. And when I say I love history, it's not just a career. It's also a passion. I do it for work, and I do it for pleasure. So how exactly did I get so into history? It was actually very simple. When I was young, I used to read a lot of comic books. What did you do? I used to read a lot of comic books. A ton of comic books. And at some point I realized that comic books are really just soap operas with superpowers. They get pretty old pretty quick. But then I realized there are people in the world that have lived in the same world, on the same planet that we live in. They are constrained by gravity and all the other problems that we have, that have done such amazing things that they might as well be superheroes. George Washington, He gets so much criticism for owning slaves, and he does deserve some criticism for that. But the amount he sacrificed for the United States is amazing, and he deserves respect for that. One of my favorite people in all of history, Abraham Lincoln. He was chronically depressed twice in his life, 2 different times as an adult. He had such crippling depression that he just laid on his couch and stared at the ceiling and waited for it to go away for 5 to 6 hours at a time. He was born in a 3-walled cabin, dirt poor, chronically sad. He was what you would call today a depressive realist, in that he saw the world how it was, and it was very, very depressing. And he was one of the most compassionate people in all of U.S. history. And he had to oversee the killing of more Americans than any president, and it all ate at him. But he did it for a bigger cause, which is really amazing. Teddy Roosevelt, who we'll talk about. The reason we know for sure that Sasquatch does not exist is because Teddy Roosevelt never killed one. If Sasquatch, Yeti, Bigfoot, if one of them existed, Roosevelt would have killed him. He killed every animal known to man, yet he is the first environmental conservationist president we ever had. He thought war was the greatest thing, but he is the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize. We will talk about him extensively. FDR completely and fundamentally altered the direction of the United States. Without him, we don't have minimum wage, 40-hour work week, Social Security. We don't have any regulations on the stock market, which some people think is a bad thing, but like him or hate him, he completely transformed the history of the United States and the course of the United States. So we will talk about him extensively. JFK. I'm not going to say he's overrated, but he gets a lot of praise, but he wasn't president long enough to accomplish everything he wanted to do. And of course, Ronald Reagan completely alters American politics. We will talk about him extensively too. So the people we will be talking about this semester, they are truly amazing. And that is how I got into this. That is a big reason I got into it, is I was fascinated by the stories of these amazing individuals. Also, I am neurodivergent, what's broadly called neurodivergent. I was diagnosed as ADHD when I was in my teens, and then also diagnosed as high-functioning autistic, what used to be called Asperger's, before they removed that diagnosis from the DSM. In general, neurodivergent is a broad category, and it includes many things. But I know how difficult school can be, especially if you're neurodivergent. And so I am very sympathetic and understanding about the struggles of OSD students. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me about that or anything I can do to help you with that. And one reason this is important is because a lot of neurodivergents are obsessed with learning and acquiring information. History is the one subject that allows me to study everything. To be a good historian, you have to know a little bit about everything. A lot about certain things, but you have to know a little bit about everything. The obvious ones: politics, religion, economics, foreign policy, law, but then also the more minutiae stuff, the cultural stuff, fashion, gender relations or race relations, men and the history of marriage, history of drug laws, history of healthcare. You get to learn everything to be a historian, which I absolutely love. So that's how I got into it. Now, more important question is, how did you get into it? Why are you here? And let me save you the discomfort by answering that for you. this is a required course. That's why most of you are here. It's because you have to take this class in order to graduate. And let me just say, that is an absolutely phenomenal reason to be here. Right now, we're going through a period where academia is dealing with some of the biggest struggles it's ever experienced. And this is all levels of academia, K through 12 and higher education. It has become insanely expensive, and there is a lot of rhetoric about how college is not worth it anymore. And I just want to be very, very clear about this. That is factually incorrect. College has never been more worthwhile. It is very expensive, unfairly expensive. However, college degree is now more valuable than it's ever been. This is a graph from 2021 Bureau of Labor Statistics. Over the course of all of our lives, people with a college degree will earn more, significantly more, than people without a college degree. And when there's an economic downturn, people with college degrees will have a much easier time getting a job and have much lower rates of unemployment. That's a graph from 2021 when I first started looking into this. And the gap has only gotten wider and wider. And it is only going to continue to get wider and wider. And I will explain why in just a little bit. So you hear about the people that do really well without a college degree. Those are anecdotes. Those are individual cases. Humans, throughout most of human history, we explain things based on stories. We love stories. Most of human history is just oral history, people telling stories over and over again. And so that's the way a lot of people's brains think. And they look at the individual cases. This is looking at data. And the data is very clear. A college degree is absolutely worth it. So that is really important to note of why you're here. But that doesn't answer the question, why history? So let me give you some better reasons. The reason you will always hear about why you're taking history is so we can learn from our mistakes. And let me be very clear about this. We never do. Ever. Because then we'd have to change what we believe. We'd have to change our thoughts. Most humans, the way they work is they pick their politics, they pick their religion, they pick the end, the conclusion, and then they spend the rest of their lives finding the evidence to justify their conclusion. And that's why most people use history to justify their belief system in the present. So I can say this with certainty too, because my specialty in history is economics, specifically economic collapses. That's why I'm so much fun at dinner parties. Economic collapses, people ignore them. Every time they're going to come, people ignore them, because then they'd have to start acting responsibly. They'd have to not pursue money, and we'll come back to this. No one ever learns from history. So that's a terrible reason. So let me give you a better reason. There's a reason history is in the humanities. The humanities are meant to make you a better human, a better person, a better citizen. And history should do that. The United States is a representative democracy. It has been a representative democracy since its beginning. And in order to have a democratic form of government, you must have an educated citizenry. You must have people that know the past. That's why the breaking down of the humanities has been so incredibly difficult for this country. Because another reason history is important and is useful is historians tend to be good at logic. In this course, you will learn to use logic. That is, putting together pieces of evidence to reach a conclusion. Logic is what lawyers use, And there is a good reason that on the LSAT, the test you take to get into law school, historians usually rank 6th or 7th, because you have to be able to use logic to put abstract concepts together to understand a conclusion. How one event will affect another event will affect another event. The longer you can see those cause and effects, the better you are at using logic. And so historians tend to be good. The number 1 and number 2 in terms of the LSAT are always math and philosophy. Philosophy uses a lot of logic, and math is all logic. That's all math problems are. So in this course, you will learn to be better at logic. That is a great skill historians have. I would argue the most important thing historians do, though, is learn to understand information and learn to understand sources. A lot of people thought that when the internet came around, that it was going to link groups together and we would bridge our divides. Obviously, that did not happen. It has divided us more than ever. Now, everyone can go on the computer, go online, and find a group that will justify whatever ridiculous belief they want, like the earth being flat. I'm going to take a very hard stance on this. The earth is not flat. Otherwise, we wouldn't have night. That is the earth rotating. Anyway. A lot of people think historians' job is to know history, but anyone can learn history. Historians' jobs, our main job, is to understand sources and the credibility of sources. In the age we're living in, where we have too much information, that is a vital tool to have. To be able to understand whether a piece of information is sound, rational, whether it can be verified, the source, where it came from, credibility of the source. That is what historians are really good at doing. So there are certain skills that historians have that in 2025 are even more important than ever. Give you an even better reason why you are here, though. We are currently living in one of the most chaotic periods in all of human history. You hear a lot of people say that, well, you hear some people say that things are bad. And you hear some people say, well, things have always been bad, or I remember when things were bad, and this is no different. We're living through the same stuff. People that say that this is not as bad as other periods, they're just wrong. And you can quote me on that. And I will give you quantifiable data to prove that's true. We are living through one of the most chaotic periods in all of human history. And so the only way you can understand the present is to understand the past. So let me tell you about the period we're living in from a historian's perspective. And this is an oversimplification, and this is very much scaled down. But here are some very practical, concrete ways that we are actually living in one of the most chaotic periods in human history. First and foremost, we are living through an economic, technological, energy, biological revolution. The last time we saw this big of a change was the late 1800s during the Gilded Age, when the United States went through the second industrial revolution. It went from being a predominantly agricultural-based society to a manufacturing-based economy and the world superpower. Now, sometimes the period we're living through is called the fourth or fifth industrial revolution, and that is not the best term for it, because this economic and technological revolution is vastly different than the ones we've seen before. All the industrial revolutions we saw before, we created tools to be more productive. Now we are creating entire systems that are making humans irrelevant. The best terms for it are the digital revolution and the knowledge-based economy. It's the digital revolution because obviously the internet is the defining feature of it. It has changed everything about everyone's jobs. And it is putting a lot of people out of work. The people that are going to be most successful in this sort of economy are the people that have some sort of knowledge. And there are 4 fields that are growing the most: computer, healthcare, finance, and education. All 4 of those require you to go to school permanently. Once you graduate, you have to constantly be going back, constantly be doing training, and you have to keep your skills up, otherwise you will fall behind. So learning is no longer something you do K through 12 and then through college. It's something you will do the rest of your life. So it's important to get to a place where you start enjoying to learn. Because in this new economy, the most important real estate you will own in your lifetime is what is between your ears. If you take a neurosurgeon, if you take a computer programmer, if you take a history professor, you can put them anywhere in the country and they can do their craft. So having a degree, this is why having a degree is so fundamentally important right now. The best term for the period we're living through, I think, is called the exponential age. There's a great book about this called The Exponential Age. And it's because change is happening at an exponential pace. There's so much to be said about this that I could go on for weeks about this one topic, but for our purposes, what is really important, 2 things that are very important. 1, anytime there is massive change, there is something in economics called creative destruction, or Schumpeter's Gale, after the economist Joseph Schumpeter. This means whenever there's a change, there are always people that are left behind. It's good for the society overall, but it always leaves people behind. For example, when we created the railroads, obviously people that made carriages lost their job. More recently, some people created an app for ride sharing, Uber, Lyft, and it is a direct challenge to taxi drivers. AI is going to displace quite a lot of people. So again, it's good for society overall, but it is a very difficult shift to live through. These kind of shifts leave a lot of people behind, and those people are obviously angry. Second thing to understand is the sheer rate and pace of change that is happening because of this is leading to a lot of uncertainty. Humans hate change. We hate uncertainty. The human brain hates it because if it's uncertain and we don't know what it is, there's a possibility it can kill us. That's why humans, we are naturally geared toward maintaining the status quo. That's why you see people stay in bad relationships, stay in horrible situations that they don't like, because they would rather have the familiar uncomfortable, the familiar that's objectively bad, than the unfamiliar unknown. And so overlying all of this is the economic and technological revolution. Besides just that, we are living through a lot of crises. There are 2 terms to know for this. One is a permacrisis. That is when there is continuous crises, one after the other after the other. And since COVID, that has been the case, and that is going to only get worse. And the reason it's going to get worse is because of everything I'm about to talk about, which brings me to the second word, a polycrisis. A polycrisis is when you have a bunch of little crises that all interact with each other to create a bigger crisis. It's like a bunch of little flames that connect together to create a much bigger flame. And that is what we are going to be living through for the next little while. And allow me to tell you why. Besides the economic and technological revolution and all the changes that's bringing, We are also, in terms of foreign policy and geopolitics, experiencing 18 straight years of the decline of democracy. We have not seen democracy in decline this much since the 1930s. And all over the world, democracy is on the decline, and it's being replaced by dictatorships or totalitarian governments. There are some defining features of these governments, and one of the main ones is a lot of them support nationalism. I will be very clear from the beginning, I am very critical of nationalism. Not because I am obsessed with current politics, it's because in human history, the period in world history known as nationalism ended with World War I and World War II. Nationalism, by its very nature, decreasing trade with other countries, putting up trade barriers, and also being in economic competition, will lead to war. The two things go together. So, since 1945, we have been living through the most peaceful period in all of human history. The 20th century in general, including World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, is the most peaceful century in human history. And it's because after 1945, we established an international rules-based system. It's not perfect, but it was incredibly successful at limiting the amount of wars, especially between the major powers. And that is going away. In the last few years, we've seen several wars break out: Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, Israel with several of its neighbors, Thailand, and it's going to get worse. So that is going to be the major trend. And we know this because 2024, we had more people vote in that 1 year than in all of human history. Not combined, but we've never had a year where more people voted. More than 50% of the world's population voted that year, and the results were very clear. The world is moving more towards nationalism, more towards dictatorships. There was a general protest vote, so countries or parties and politicians that were in power were generally thrown out. Whoever was the incumbent was thrown out. Happened in the United States, happens in Canada, happened in Germany, happened in Japan, happened in Korea, happened all over the place. And it was, in general, a win for dictatorships, nationalism, which means we are going to be moving more and more towards war. The problem with foreign policy, one major problem is the Cold War was so much fun because it's just two world powers. It's bipolar. The world is no longer bipolar. It is insanely complicated. We have economic rivals. We have geopolitical rivals. We have ideological rivals. We have cultural rivals. It's much, much more complicated. And it's only going to continue to get more complicated and more chaotic. Related to the geopolitics is the environmental crisis we are going through. Now, right now, in 2024, 2025, we are seeing a continuous increase in the amount of billion-dollar natural disasters, and they're happening faster and faster. In 2023, we had a $1 billion natural disaster every 13 days. That was very close in 2024. And this is in terms of insurance payouts. So this is not speculative. This is based on quantifiable data. And it is part of the reason everyone's insurance is going up. And obviously, as I record this, LA fires are still going on, and all insurance is going up. That's why Florida has the highest insurance rates for houses and cars, and people cannot get insured because of all the natural disasters. And this, based on the numbers, is only going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And a big part of the environmental disaster. So this is specifically referring to hurricanes, tornadoes, freezes, flooding, stuff like that. But a big part of the environmental disaster is the freshwater crisis. We are going to experience mass migration of people like we have not seen since the 1930s during the Dust Bowl, when everyone left the middle of the country and went out west, called Okies, even though they weren't all from Oklahoma, but because we had created a great desert in the middle of the country. This is already starting to happen. In Texas, in this year alone, I think we're losing somewhere around 10 farmers a day because the tanks are just drying up. A lot of cities are reaching their day zero where they're not producing enough water to provide for their citizens, to replenish their stock, and so are having to cut down on the amount of water. Mexico City, it happened very recently, and obviously Mexico is very close to the United States. So when this happens, this is going to lead to mass migrations, and it's going to lead to a lot of instability and chaos. When I was an undergrad, we talked about the freshwater crisis, and the data projection from then, we are beating that by decades because we are using up fresh water way too fast. Freshwater crisis is going to affect the entire world because when it comes to having access to fresh water, no one cares about rules, no one cares about laws. If someone especially has kids, they will do anything to get fresh water, and all rules go out the window. So freshwater crisis is something that in our lifetimes, in the very near future, we will have to experience and deal with in a very serious way. Related to the freshwater crisis and the environmental crisis is our infrastructure crisis. The United States ranks 13th by the World Economic Forum in terms of infrastructure. Our infrastructure, a lot of the infrastructure in the United States was built 100 years ago. A lot of it is from the New Deal. It was never meant to be permanent. It was supposed to be replaced. The American Society of Civil Engineers did a survey of all U.S. infrastructure, and they gave it a C- rating. There are more than 45,000 dams in the United States, and 1 in 5 miles of road that is in poor condition. Of those dams, there's something like 20,000 that if they break, they will lead to death, and that is very serious. A lot of the water mains under cities were built during the Great Depression. So about half of the water that's going through the system is being lost just because of rusty pipes. And right now, on average, 1 water main breaks in the United States every 2 minutes. That means the United States is losing 6 billion gallons of fresh water per day, which is about 9 Olympic swimming pools worth of water. So our infrastructure is failing us, and it is exacerbating the freshwater crisis. It's exacerbating the other problems that we're experiencing. And economics. This is a big one. I had to cut this down significantly, but it is very, very bad right now. And it's bad for, put this in 2 broad categories. One, the short term, and the long term. In the short term, we're experiencing 4 bubbles. There is a stock market bubble. The stock market is at record highs, and it's not because businesses are just doing better than ever. It's very complicated why, but it is a bubble. And within the stock market bubble, there is also a tech bubble. The tech bubble, it comes down to 8 stocks. They're 9 stocks are the Batman stocks, and they make up such a significant part of the growth in stocks. It is equivalent to the dot-com bubble that popped in 1999. That was a huge, huge collapse, but our tech bubble is bigger than that. Our stock market bubble is bigger than the stock bubble during the Great Depression. We also have a housing bubble, which is bigger than the housing bubble in 2007, 2008. And we also have a commercial real estate bubble, a result of COVID. After COVID, well, it's been going up for a while. Since 2009, when it hit a low after the 2007, 2008 collapse, it has more than doubled. It's taken a little bit hit since COVID, but there are a lot of commercial real estate properties that are in trouble, which if those go under, they're going to really hurt banks. And if banks go under, then it's going to hurt all of us. That's just in the United States. As far as I know, there's no example of 4 bubbles like this happening at once. These bubbles are massive, but it's just in the United States. There's bubbles happening all over the world. And if a bubble pops in China, like China has a real estate bubble, and if China's economy collapses, which it looks like it's going to, there's speculation it'll collapse before the United States, that will bring the U.S. economy down with it. There is so much trade between the two countries that when one economy goes down, the other goes down with it. It was true in the Great Depression, it's true now. Countries, even if they think they're against each other, if they have a lot of trade, when one economy goes down, it will bring the other one down with it. So there are so many bubbles happening right now. And you will hear people say, and I've heard many people say, well, there's been a prediction of a stock market bubble or a stock market crash for years now. And that's true. There has been predictions that the stock market is overvalued for about 4 years now because it has been overvalued for 5 years now. It's been incredibly overvalued. And there's ways to measure it. It's called the PE index. But the idea that because people have been predicting a bubble for years and it hasn't popped yet means it's not going to pop is ridiculous. That's because it's only gotten bigger and bigger. That's like saying the bubble keeps getting bigger, so that means it won't pop. No, it means it's going to be a bigger pop. And there's a great book about this. Every time there is a bubble, you will get people saying, this time is different. No, this time is different. And we have 800 years of evidence showing, no, it is not different. A bubble is a bubble, and it will pop. So, in the short term, there is a lot to be worried about. The bigger concern I have is the long term. And in the long term, the problem we are facing is increasing income inequality. There's a period in U.S. history from 1945 after World War II until 1973 known as the Golden Age of Capitalism, when we had the lowest rate of income inequality, the biggest, strongest middle class in all of human history. That is the most radical part of the 20th century, is having a majority of the population doing financially well. There was poverty, but middle class is such a rare thing in human history. And I would argue that if you are very concerned about cultural issues like gender and race, this is more important because we only have social movements like the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement from good economies, not bad economies. In a bad economy, we don't get social movements because everyone's trying to survive. So if you believe in gender, or if you're really interested in gender and racial equality, economic inequality should be a key issue. Since 1980, we are living through what's called the Great Divergence, or a winner-take-all economy. It's where a small group of people are monopolizing huge parts of the industry and becoming abnormally wealthy at the expense of the majority of the population. I don't say this because I'm a hippie. I'm not a hippie. The reason this is so important is because 70% of the U.S. economy is based on consumer spending. So when you talk about investment and consumer spending is the one that drives the U.S. economy. It is 68% specifically, but it's close to 70% of it. So when too few people have too much of the money and too many people have too little money, it means there's a hit to consumer spending. And we are seeing this in real time. The amount of credit card defaults that are happening right now is the same as it was in 2007, 2008. So that means people are using their credit cards to pay for basic necessities and aren't able to pay those off. Savings accounts are being drained, and there's a general struggle for a lot of people right now. Right now, there is only two groups of people that are really doing well in the United States. There's two groups of people that are receiving most of the wealth. One are senior citizens, specifically the boomers. The economy works the absolute best for them. They are the ones, since the 1960s, they have been doing better and better and better. There's all sorts of reasons for this. And it's not that they're not struggling. It's just they're getting more of the wealth of the country than the other age brackets. The other group, of course, is the super rich. Super rich are doing incredibly well, and older people are doing well. Why are older people doing so well? Because they control the government and they vote. And so they have enacted policies that are better for them. We don't actually live in a democracy. Well, we live in a form of democracy. It's called a gerontocracy, rule by the elderly. And if this sounds like I'm being too critical of the boomers, I'm not. I know not all boomers are responsible for this. And I would never say baby boomers are responsible for the bad economy and the economic problems. But all of these authors would. If you don't believe that this is true, by all means, check out these books because they will break down the economic differences and specific economic policies that have made it so older generations are doing significantly better. And over the next several years, the majority of money, the majority of government spending is going to go to senior citizens. The vast majority of money is going to go to senior citizens. So senior citizens are doing much better. And I will just point out also, when people blame young people for being on the TikTok and for being on their phones and whatever, young people have not controlled the government. Baby boomers have controlled every level of government. So you cannot blame young people for the problems. And I'll give you one concrete example of a policy, example of the policy differences. In 2023, after COVID ended, there was a child tax credit that was going through Congress. It was going to cost $11 billion. Of course, everyone kept saying, where are we going to get the money to pay for this? $11 billion, we can't afford this, we can't afford this. So the child tax credit, which gave $300 in tax deductibles to parents with kids, that went away. And we saw the biggest increase in child poverty in 1 year in all of U.S. history, more than doubled. That same congressional session, there was a Social Security bill that was going to increase the amount of Social Security given to senior citizens. That was going to be $135 billion. That sailed through no problem. $11 billion for kids is too much. $135 billion for seniors. So there is a problem with our economy, a big problem. And it's having a very important historical effect. Since 1950, or in 1950, more than 90% of Americans did better economically than their parents. Didn't matter what race, didn't matter what ethnicity, 92% of Americans did better economically. Millennials will be the first generation in U.S. history that the majority of them will do worse economically than their parents. You cannot say this is due to individual failing, individual initiative, individual problem. This is too big. The numbers are too big to be individual fault. The United States, once the most socially mobile country in the world, has lost that standing. I think the United States is now something like 29th in social mobility. So the same country that allowed someone like Abraham Lincoln to go from absolute abject poverty to president of the United States, it's not the same country. Related to all of this, of course, is politics. The United States is more polarized than we've been since the 1850s, right before the Civil War. And there's a lot of ways polarization is measured. Two different news getting to the two different parties, and so two different sets of facts, voting patterns in Congress. We are more polarized, or as polarized as we were in the 1850s, right before the Civil War. And the polarization we're experiencing now is the most dangerous kind. It's called tribalism. Tribalism, we'll talk about a lot more during this semester, because it's the most important way to understand humans' interaction with each other. And there's a lot of social psychology research on this that we'll talk about more, but the tribalism we're looking at now is called identity politics. And it's not just identity politics, it's negative partisanship. Negative partisanship is where people form not based on having an idea for what's best for the country, but they form based on shared hatred and shared victimhood. That has become the rhetoric of most groups. We are the most oppressed. We are the ones that are being oppressed, and hating other people. This has been a major part of the United States politics during this period. And it is, unsurprisingly, also a way very wealthy have manipulated the majority of the population throughout most of history. So the whole woke and anti-woke fight, that is very intense. There is a reason Elon Musk is obsessed with this, and it's not because of his child. It's because throughout all of human history, the very rich who are taking all the wealth from the lower classes, they divide the class based on race, ethnicity, religion, and today, gender. That is such a common trait all throughout human history. It's such a formulaic manipulation tactic that it's good to know it when you see it, but obviously most people are just falling completely prey to it. So we are living through a politically polarized period, to say the very least, and that is not going to be a surprise. There is a historical precedence for what we are going through, and it is going to be a crisis. There was a famous book that came out in the 1990s called The Fourth Turning, and just a couple of years ago, they remade it. One of the authors, the one alive now, Neil Howe, he rewrote it, and it's called The Fourth Turning is Here. And it basically says, see, I told you so, because everything they said in the 1990s turns out to be true, and it turns out it is true. Every 80 to 100 years in U.S. history, the United States experiences a crisis. They build up institutions, create stability, and then over the next several decades, they destroy it. The first crisis, the American Revolution. The second crisis was the Civil War. Third crisis, Great Depression, World War II. We are currently living in the fourth crisis. And here's a meme of meme summary of this. Hard times create strong men. So the last hard time we have, the Great Depression, World War II, created the greatest generation, the people that lived through it, or the silent generation. Strong men create good times. They created the golden age of capitalism. Good times create weak men. Those would be the baby boomers. Weak men create hard times. That is what we're living through now. And let me just give you a few of the characteristics of the crisis periods, the periods right before a crisis. Extreme pessimism about the country. 76% of Americans say the United States is heading in the wrong path. Partisanship, we definitely have that. Institutional decline. We are destroying our institutions, especially the three most important ones in the United States: capitalism, representative democracy, and religious freedom. toxic individualism, everyone is off in their own silos, and populism, which is inherently anti-intellectual and believes in conspiracy theories over facts, and short-term concerns versus long-term concerns. That's where we are now. Everything I said describes what we are living through now. So all of this is stuff that is going to affect us today. There's a lot more I could talk about, but I'm only explaining the ones that are going to be in a very real way affecting all of us. So we absolutely need to know this stuff because we can't ignore it. Also, it's no surprise we're having a mental health crisis. When I hear people say that young people are weak, it makes me very angry. Young people understand, maybe not all the facts I just mentioned, but they understand we are going through a crisis period. And they are the ones that are going to have to deal with it. The people that did not create it are going to have to live through it and are going to have to fix it. And so it is no wonder that depression and anxiety are so high. Nothing causes depression more than being financially insecure, not knowing how you're going to pay rent, how you're going to pay off the credit card, how you're going to get out of default. It's not that young people are weak. It's not that people that admit they have mental health problems are weak. The problem is we act like it's something wrong with the brain, and it can be in certain cases. But a lot of the time, if you dig a little bit into people's lives, there's a very practical reason that they are depressed. And that's why we are experiencing more deaths of despair than at any point in U.S. history since we started keeping records. It's also why we are experiencing a loneliness epidemic. We are all very isolated. We are working nonstop, and we're very afraid. And we're very worried about what's going to happen next. There's good reason for this. There's good reason to be worried. And the loneliness epidemic, that one, mental health crisis, that one really gets to me. I take mental health very seriously. I have experienced very severe periods of depression in my life, and I take your mental health very seriously. NCTC takes your mental health very seriously. So if you are having a mental health issue, then please always know that I'm here for you. And I take it very seriously and will work with you to get through it. I will refer you to counselors and help you get the resources you need in order to get through it. But the most important thing is to admit that things aren't good. This was very heavy, I know. And the question is, so what the hell happened? How the hell did we get here? That's why we are here. That's why you are here. In order to understand how we got here, and also evidence and examples of what works to get us out of here, history can do that. That's why you are here. That's why you are taking this class. That's why this class is so important for you right now. And if you stay in this class, if you complete all the assignments, I can guarantee you 6 things by the end of the semester. I can guarantee you will know 5 things. I can guarantee you 6 things. 1, you will know the past better. 2, because of that, you'll know the present better. You'll know the world better. You'll know the United States better. And because of that, you will know yourself better. I can guarantee you those 5 things, and I can guarantee you, you will find reason to hope. I have no patience for optimism. Optimism is blindly wishing things get better. Hope is believing that we can work to make things better. And I have a lot of hope. And I promise you, throughout the semester, you will be able to understand why history shows there are things to be hopeful for. And I have a lot of hope. And I'm going to sound like a cheesy asshole, but my biggest source of hope is working with you guys. Students give me hope. Students, regardless of whatever their political position, fundamentally understand all these problems I just mentioned and understand we are going to have to deal with them together. So we will figure out a way to get through this. And this semester, I'm so excited to be working with you. And I look forward to hearing from you and learning about you. Thank you very much.